First thing is we're going to talk today a little bit about the system coming up in 2021, and we're also going to talk about what we're dealing right now with the suspension of play due to COVID-19. So, in order to understand and embrace why changes need to happen in 2021, we need to explain to you why it was deemed that those changes were necessary. So the first portion of this explaining to you is going to be statistical. So we're going to give you some facts and some numbers that will reflect how the current system was performing. So in 2018, the distribution of our junior players in Texas, these are all Texas specific numbers I'm going to give you on this slide. It was that 16% of our players belong to the super champ level, 25% were in the champ level, and 59% were in the challenger level. As you can see clearly reflected there, the challenger level, it's our largest level. And I can't say that it's necessarily more important because they're all important, but if you were to take the challenger level away, eventually what you currently have as champs and supers would eventually become extinct because those players would all eventually age out of playing junior tennis. So with that said, is challenger level our most important level? Probably yes, because the challenger level, without the challenger, players cannot become champs and supers. So the challenger level is the entry level that allows our system to be sustainable and to perhaps be able to grow and enhance itself. So we understand by now that the challenger level, it's the largest portion. What I'm showing you now next, it's the 8-year trend from 2010 to 2018 of that challenger level. Specifically, that challenger level in 8 years has decreased by 33%. That means is that in 2010, that challenger level had a total of 7,728 players in it. In 2018, that had decreased to a total of 5,146 players. So again, if that is our most important level and it's decreasing, the alarms got to start to go off that perhaps we need to look at the system and maybe there's something that needs to be done about it because it is not being able to retain and grow. It's actually losing and decreasing. So the last portion that I'm going to show you here, it is just in the year 2018, the retention of the players at the challenger level. And what happened in 2018 was that 41% of the player of that 5,146 players did not play a second tournament. They played one. For some reason, they did not enjoy it. They didn't like it. It was not convenient. They decided to not return. And then to get more alarming, 61% of those players did not play more than two. So again, if we go back, if we were in any type of business in the business world, and these were our numbers of if I own a grocery store and it showed me that overall in 8 years, the amount of people that come through my door had decreased 33%, and that specifically on that year, 41% of those individuals didn't come a second time and 61 didn't come more twice. We immediately start addressing how are we going to change the store? How is our operational system? How are we treating the customer? Because they're not enjoying it, they're not retaining, they're not coming back. Therefore, we're not going to grow. We take the chance, if we ignore it, that we could become extinct in just a few years down the road. So I showed you those numbers that were Texas specific. I'm going to show you nationwide in the entire country, the 17 sections that make up the USTA in the US. I'm going to show you that challenger level, what their retention number was. And it's actually worse than ours. It was 60% of the players did not come back after one tournament, one experience. So these numbers alone spoke very loudly to national. and they said, we need to do something. But they didn't want to stop just at the numbers, because the numbers tell you that you need to do something, but what it is that you need to do, it's a different story that the numbers necessarily don't really speak loudly to you. So in order to find out what is it that you need to change and how is it that you need to change, in order to do that, the USTA National contracted University of Central Florida, UCF, to conduct a market research. And UCF did a research players, parents, and coaches. And what that research determined was, the summary of the results was that the consumer wants a competitive pathway that it's easy to find and register for, that supports local play, is affordable, it's a blend of rankings and ratings, and supports multi-sport participation. They also want competitive events that are well run and well officiated. They want better trained coaches to help with participation in competition. They want youth progression that refers to 10 and under play, that is based on skill development and not necessarily just accumulating items or points in order to be able to proceed, but perhaps not truly developing the player's skills. And they also wanted a team competition pathway for all skill levels. So they appreciate to a certain degree that tennis is an individual sport. They value that, but as well, they'll like to see the children being able to be exposed to the sport in a way that they're more connected with their peers in team environments. So after getting all those, the USTA National put a group together of what they deemed to be experts from throughout the country. They had those experts work on this for a period of about 3 years. So this was not something that they just looked at for 2 seconds and they said, oh, here's what we're going to do. No, 3 years, constant meetings. Several of us in the Texas staff were a part of that group. So we can tell you that it was very active, the amount of work and diligent work that was put together into coming up with what this new system is going to be. So we're going to get now into what is the new system that's coming in 2021. So the new system is one common, identical for all sections. So whether you are now playing in the Eastern section in New York, or you're in the Southern Cal section in California, or you're in the Florida section, it doesn't matter. The system is identical anywhere you go in the country. I can tell you that personally, I believe we are going to benefit the most from this unification of system because we were the most radical. So there are 17 sections in the US. To give you a little bit of background on this, 16 of those sections operated with slight deviances on what they did, but they were fairly similar to each other. They all were based on a level system with only one ranking system within it. As you know, in Texas, we have 3 systems independent from each other with certain metrics that have to be met in order to earn the right to advancement to the next level. And that made us very unique. How did that hurt us? I'm going to tell you how it hurt us. Unless you were from Texas or at some point in your career as a college coach, player, parent, if you had been in Texas, you understood and you knew when somebody said, I'm a super champ, or I'm a champ, or I'm a challenger. But if you were anywhere in the country in the US, no idea what someone was referring to when they said the word super champ. So how does that play an impact on your world as players and as parents? Well, most of you are getting your children involved in the sport, and the players are involved in the sport with the objective that at the end of this junior career, there might be some hope that you could possibly play college tennis. Well, unless the person you're speaking to had been in Texas or understood what Texas system was all about. They had no idea when they were trying to recruit you, or you're trying to get them to pay attention to you. They have no idea how to understand or how to interpret our system. So when you reached out to them, let's say it was somebody in the Pacific Northwest part of the country, and you were reaching out to a college coach there, and you were trying to get them to look at you, and for the most part, that coach will be familiar with levels, system, and one ranking. But when you tell them that I'm a champ player in Texas and I'm ranked this number, they have no idea what you're talking to. And it becomes very risky for them to try to make an assessment of what they think, how good you actually could be, and take that risk to possibly bring you in and let you play on their team. So right now, our system is set up that if you wanted to go play collegiate tennis in Texas, perfectly fine. All the coaches, for the most part, understand it. They know what you're talking about. But the moment you wanted to go anywhere else, or if you were not able to meet the requirements or the skill level that some of the Texas schools demand, but other schools in the country could benefit from having a player of your level, that was a really difficult task to accomplish because we were so radical. Going into one common system now, when you start talking about your ranking to a collegiate coach, is going to be very simple for them to understand it because everybody's doing the same thing. The second part is we go to one common ranking. So there's no longer a ranking in Texas and a ranking in Florida and a ranking in Northern and a ranking in every single section of the US. No, we all have now one common national ranking. So let's say you're a 12-year-old boy that plays in the system, like Brandon, for example. When Brandon goes to look at the ranking, Brandon will show on the ranking in comparison with every other player in the country that plays, that's around the similar age that Brandon is. Again, facilitating the ability for collegiate coaches and possible opportunities to the players to be more streamlined in order to be interpreted and properly locate the player in programs and opportunities where they truly belong. The next one common point chart. So as you know, if you've navigated through the Texas system, there's 30 something point charts. There's a lot of point charts that we have between all the three levels with 70 something possible combinations, depending on the tournament you're playing, between the point chart that applies to that tournament and the bonus points that apply to that tournament as well. You have to find accurately what is it that connects here in order to have a good idea before the rankings actually come out of how you did and what's coming your way. In this new system, one common point chart for the entire country. So everybody is unified. It's a much simpler process to interpret, understand, and navigate through as a player and as a parent. The last one, players are allowed to go play anywhere in the US. So in the past, I don't know if you ever tried doing this, but let's say that you have a relative in the Florida area and you wanted to send your child to spend some time with them during the summer. And in order to get to Florida and your child be able to play in some of their events, you needed to plan this 60 to 90 days in advance because there's a bunch of paperwork that you have to complete, submit in order to get approved. And even when you're approved, it's approval with a lot of limitations of which events are the ones that you can actually play in. Like no section is going to allow you to go in right now and play any event that is being played in their section. You're going to be very limited to a few events. For example, in the Super Champ system, if you're not from the Texas section and you want to play in a Super Champ event in Texas, there's only 4 events in the entire year that you're allowed to possibly play in them if you've gone through the proper process to gain approval to do so. If you go back now to the second line in this slide, the one that says one common ranking, you look right underneath it, it tells you that 6 tournaments count. In our current system in Texas, you're aware that your top 5 scoring tournaments are the ones that make up your total amount of points that then shows up on your record and gives you the ranking. In this new system, that nationwide system, your highest 6 scoring tournaments will count. As I told you earlier, you can go play anywhere in the country. There's some slight restrictions of how many of the events you play outside of the section that you claim to be your residency section that can count towards your highest 6. So for example, in the 12 and under category, you can only have a max 2 out of tournaments out of section count as your highest 6. So it doesn't mean that you can only play 2 tournaments in another section. You could play 10 tournaments in Florida this summer, but out of those 10 tournaments, if 2 of them are amongst your highest 6 scoring tournaments in the year, then those 2 will count towards your record. If all 6 of your tournaments, your highest ones, are all from Texas, then all the Texas ones are the ones that are going to count. So it's not a requirement that you need to have 2 out of section, is that a maximum of 2 out of section can count. In the 14 through 18s, that formula goes from only 2 out of section possibly counting to 3 out of section possibly counting. This, what I'm showing you now, is the new pathway that it's going to be going into play in 2021. If you look back at the time that you got started with the sport and how difficult and challenging, if you grew up playing tennis in Texas, it was fairly simple for you because you had gone through the system. You figure it out, or your parents figure it out for you. And now you're being able to do the same for your child. But if you are not a tennis player, or you didn't grow up playing tennis in Texas, when you came into our system, it becomes extremely intimidating, challenging to understand how do we navigate through this system. So as a result of that, this new clear pathway process has been put into play and goes into effect in 2021. At the very bottom, it's identified the ways in which players can get introduced to the sport. They can sign up for intro to tennis classes in their communities at public parks. They can participate in the PE school programs or after school programs, whatever it is that they go to school. That program itself has been expanded. That school program used to be only from 3rd to 6th grade at the schools. In 2021, it goes now from K through 12. And the last part in which you can be introduced is through a coach. There could be a coach that you meet locally because you want to get some lessons. That coach now themselves will be able to introduce you to this pathway and help you see a much clearer vision of how do I progress and get involved with this game of tennis. In the middle area, in the dark blue, you have the first exposure to competition for the players. If you see at the bottom, all 3 of those at the bottom, team challenge on the left, team tournament in the center, and team league on the right, they all have that common word team involved in them. And at the very top, you have the level-based play events. And right underneath it says round-robin formats with ratings. So in this space, in this dark blue space, there's no rankings yet involved. The players play in this area and they get introduced to gaining a rating system. And that rating system will be utilized to best group them so their peer experience in the team events becomes as possibly enjoyable to them. At the very top is what we're going to be mostly focusing during our presentation today, which is, as you can see it from left to right, it is identifying 7 levels. Level 7 at the very far left, that's the bottom. And then it's working its way up to level 1 at the very top. And then after level 1, it's working towards ITF worldwide junior events. The objective of this system is to clearly present a pathway that a player should be seeking if they really want to make a commitment to the sport, that they're seeking to become very good in their geographical area. Once they become good in their geographical area, they're seeking to become very good in the section. After that, they seek to become very good in the country, in the US. And then after that, if they meet all that and they want more, then they can step into the ITF area and seek to become a very good junior player worldwide. So your question might be, great, fantastic, Julio, you give me all this information, but as you said along the way so far, we are the most drastic in this change. So it would be irresponsible of me to not help you understand how is it that we envision that our current Texas system and the players fit into this new system. So this new system, if you can look at it here, is a different diagram, but this pyramid looking thing with level 1 at the very top and level 7 at the very bottom, it's the same thing that you saw a minute ago that was in the yellow arrows going from left to right. What I'm going to explain to you right now, it's one of the two biggest challenges as Texas players that you will encounter to comprehend and kind of wrap our head around this new change to what we're used to. Because in the past, in our system, we tend to label the players and box them up. So once a player, say, qualified to be considered to be a super champ, and we put him into that box on the far right that says super champ, they could no longer play a champ tournament or a challenger today or a challenger one day. They could only play super champ tournaments. In this new system, that happened, that process does not take place. So in the new system, let's say that you are mostly a level 7 player, but there's a level 1 tournament coming up. All that means is you're allowed to sign up for the level 1 tournament. Nobody tells you that you cannot try to get into the event. So you sign up for the event. Registration closes. When registration closes, if that event was set to have a draw of 32 players in your age group, and you're the lowest player, you're the 32nd ranked player based on your ranking that entered that tournament, you're in and you're allowed to play. Where in the past, that wouldn't have happened, because we're going to say for now that a challenger one-day player most likely is the one playing a level 7 tournament, and a level 1 tournament, it's like a top national event. In the past, that challenger one-day event player wouldn't have been able to, they would have been able to sign up for the event, but wouldn't have been considered. They would have been taken out before players were considered. And if that player would have been the 32nd ranked player in that level 1, they still would have been kicked out, would not have been allowed to play, even though there was an open spot on the draw, simply because they did not meet the qualification requirement in our section to play in that event. So what I'm going to show you next, it doesn't mean at all by any means that that's the level that that player has to play in. All I'm going to show you now is most likely this is the level that we anticipate our current players, if they're a super, a champ, a challenger, today or one day, these are the levels that we anticipate the majority of the time that they'll be playing their tournaments in. So I already revealed to you that the challenger one day most likely will play the level 7s. Why would they play the level 7s? Because the level 7s are a half to 1 day event. The challenger 2-day players most likely will play the level 6 and level 7s. If you're a champ player, most likely you'll play the level 5s and level 6s. But could you sign up for a level 2? Yes. If there's an open spot, will you be allowed to play? Yes. And the super champ players will be most likely play level 1, level 2, level 3s, level 4, and some level 5s as well. The ranking system. So how does the ranking system work in 2021? In 2021, if you look to the left of this slide, you can see the numbers 1 through 7 from top to bottom. And then if you follow the number 1, for example, from left to right, it identifies for you that a level 1 tournament is a national championship, and it will have a length of 4+ days to take place. And you can then see that at level 2, it's a national event, 4+ days. At level 3, It's a national and sectional closed event. So that's 4+ days at level 4 and so on the way to level 7. Now, to the right of this, I'm showing you now, excuse me, the weight in which this point chart of values was created. So what it's telling you here is that at the level 1 national championship, let's say, for example, that the player wins that tournament, hypothetically here, that player will get 100%, or we can say 100 points. But if a player was to win a level 5, if you look to the right, it says 10%. So in relation to the level 1, they'll be getting 10 points. So to give you a clear, direct example of how it plays out, currently our point table states that if you win a level 1 national tournament, you get 3,000 points. So if you won a level 1 and you got 100%, which equals 3,000 points, that means that in the new point chart, if you were to win a level 5 and you get 10% of the 3,000 points, it means you get 300 points. That's the way the formula they came up to best distribute the point charts and create something that makes sense for the entire country to fall under one common system and allow for this cross-sectional play and truly not really have one section versus another having some kind of special benefit for playing in the system. Now, in order to truly understand how the ranking is going to work and how we transition into this 2021, we need to look at what's happening now in 2020. So in 2020, you currently see your national ranking the way you've always seen it. You also see your sectional ranking the way you've always seen it. What's happening though in the background is there's a shadow national ranking that's running simultaneously with our current 2020 sectional and national ranking. That shadow national ranking will become visible to you on the third quarter of this year. And the objective is that when you see that shadow ranking, you get an idea how it is that you're going to look like in the rankings come January 1st of 2021, when that shadow ranking then takes over. It becomes a ranking that we follow in order to get accepted into the tournaments. So you can say to me now, well, this is a little confusing, this shadow national ranking. How are they determining that? Well, the national shadow ranking, it's utilizing the point values of the new point chart that goes into effect in 2021, and it's giving those point values to the performance you're putting forward in 2020 in your tournament play. In 2021, our events are no longer open entry. Remember earlier I said there were two very challenging situations to Texas players. This might be the second challenging situation to Texas players, because in the past, there's a certain level of convenience that if you were a Super Champ player, you knew already what tournaments you're playing the entire year. If you were a champ player, the same way, and if you were a challenger player, the same way. In this new system, you're not guaranteed when you apply for a tournament that you will be in the tournament. When you apply to a tournament is what the word implies. You're applying to be considered, and based on the strength of your ranking against the other players that sign up for the tournament is that you get in or not. So I'll give you an example. It's a tournament with a set draw of 64 players per age group. So you apply, and when the event closes, turns out to be you're the 61st, 61 ranked player of the applicants. Well, we know that the tournament is taking 64, so you're in. You immediately you go from a list that looks online as an applicant into a list that shows online that you're a competitor in the event and you're playing that tournament. But what would happen if you apply and when the tournament closed registration and they look to see everybody who entered, you're not in the top 64. You say you're ranked 90th in the rankings for that event. Well, that means you didn't make the cut to enter into the event. So you will be receive an email letting you know that we are sorry, but unfortunately you did not make the entrance into the event. If you would like to be put into a waiting list, please communicate that to the tournament director. You then can select to let the tournament director, please put me into the waiting list. And then if somebody drops out, you're selected to go into the event. Or you can simply not tell the tournament director and look to see what other tournament with the deadline still open could you possibly enter for that weekend. I can tell you that the committee for the Texas section that's working on doing the scheduling is working really hard. So for example, at level 4, we'll close registration with at least a 24-hour notice. So if by any chance you didn't get into the level 4, you still have 24 hours to then possibly register for the level 5 that's happening that weekend. Next one that you might be concerned, allocation and distribution. Who decides where the tournaments go and how are the tournaments going to be placed throughout the section? Why should that be a concern of yours? Because, I mean, right now you may be living in an area that's considered to be extremely well centrally located, and you can play a lot of tournaments without really having to travel or do much of anything, but just wake up in the morning, go play, and sleep in your own bed. Well, I want to explain to you how this process is happening. So hopefully you have some peace of mind and you can see the depth at which this is being looked into in order to create the most fair opportunity for all the players. So to the left now, you have again that pyramid with the 7 levels. Level 1 tournaments are national controlled events. What that means is that national is the one that decides where the events are located in the country, when they take place, and who gets to run that event. Level 2 events, the same way. National controls all aspects of where that event goes and what happened, who gets to run it. Level 3, if you notice, there's a slight change on the color ink there. That's because that is the first level at which the section is starting to have control of where the event goes, who gets to run it, and when it happens. So there are some level 3s that national controls, but there's 2 level 3s that the Texas section controls. And those of you who are super champs and playing the super champ level, you know that those 2 level 3s in our current system, it's the January Super Champ and the Texas Slam. The level 4, completely, the section controls all the level 4s that happen in the Texas section. Section controls where they go, when they take place, and who runs it. But national controls the amount of level 4s that every section throughout the country gets to run. So, for example, in our case, we're limited to 8 level 4s. 4 of those level 4s are what's considered to be closed events, which means that only Texas players, so players who claim Texas as their home section or residency section, can play the 4 closed events. Then you see that there's 4 open events. The 4 open events means that anyone in the country can come to Texas and sign up and try to play our 4 open level 4s. The same way that anyone from Texas can apply and try to play any open level 4 throughout the rest of the country. Level 5s, similar to level 4s. The section controls, but national dictates that we only have 36 level 5s to give out in the Texas section, and all 36 of those events are open, which means, again, anybody from the country can come play those events, and anybody from Texas can go anywhere in the country and play level 5s events in other sections. The level 6 section controls, but if we reach now the first area where national, it's no longer dictating how many events we can run in the section. So in the level 6, we have an unlimited amount of level 6s to run in the section. And the objective is to have enough offerings of level 6s to meet the needs and demands of the current customer base or current player base, and still also worked into it some padding number of maybe 20% of open spots. For example, in case players from other sections select to come play here because these are also open events, or in case that our system suddenly starts to grow. So that way we don't limit the player's ability to compete if they so chose to. The level 7, sectional controlled, and again, like the level 6s, unlimited and open event as well. What's the big difference between level 6 and level 7? Because they look very similar. I told you earlier the level 7s are a 1-day event. The level 6 are a 2-day event. I'm going to give you another difference between the two. From levels 1 through 6, the players are accepted into the tournaments based on the strength of their ranking. So the highest ranked player gets more preference into getting into an event versus the lesser ranked player. In the level 7s, it's the opposite. In the level 7s, the lesser ranked player or the player with no ranking, it's selected into the event before the players with higher rankings or rankings. Next is the distribution of events. So when you look at this map, you can see 3 triangular areas. Those have been identified, the areas where for the most part our events take place. You can say to me, well, there's a lot of tournaments that take place in Beaumont, and Beaumont is not in any of the triangles, neither is Tyler. Yes, you're correct. But what we deem based on the triangle is that Beaumont and Tyler normally, for the most part, populate the events also in that central triangle that you see there in the middle. Well, what about Wichita Falls? Well, Wichita Falls, mostly their players populate either the Northwest Triangle events or the central events, because a lot of that northern part of Fort Worth and Dallas is very convenient to them. And you can see at the bottom the Southern Triangle as well. So how are we going to distribute the tournaments to be fair to all these 3 triangles? It's really easy. The committee actually looked at several ideas, and the conclusion was that it was best to understand our current percentage of distribution and simply follow that same statistic. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say that currently there is 10 Super Champ tournaments. Of those 10, 7 take place in the Central Triangle, 2 take place in the Northwest Triangle, and 1 takes place in the Southern Triangle. Well, if you look at it, that would mean that if 7 of 10 are in Central, it means Central's getting 70% of the tournaments. If 2 of 10 are in Northwest, it means that Northwest is getting 20%. And if 1 of 10 is in the South, it means the South gets 10% of whatever amount of events at that level are available in the section. So to give you something that is, it's a little more visual to you, let's say hypothetical. Let's say that, for example, in 2021, we have 1,000 level 4 events to allocate throughout the section. And let's say that currently the Central Triangle has 80% of our offerings. The Northwest has 12% of our offerings. And the South has 8% of our offerings. What that would mean then in 2021, it will be that out of that 1,000 tournaments, the Central will get 800 because that is 80% of what's available, the 1,000 that we can give out. Northwest will get 12% of the 1,000, so they'll get 120. And the South will get 8% of the 1,000, so they will get 80. These are some highlights of this new system compared to what we had before. As you can see in the center, we go back again to a more simple, clear pathway. And if you go back to the screen what I showed you, the research from UCF, the first thing that parents, coaches, and players were looking for was something that was more simple all the way around. In this new system, boys and girls can play doubles with each other, and mixed doubles will count towards the ranking. So I can tell you the committee is already looking at some pretty cool scheduling probabilities or possibilities in which you may go to a tournament and it's doubles only, and on Saturday you play gender doubles, and on Sunday you get to play mixed doubles. And if we do that, although you only played one tournament, you'll have twice the opportunity to score points towards your ranking. You then have incentives to play instead of requirements to play. That to us was not really directly applied to Texas, because although yes it does, because in the past we required you to stay within your playing level. So if you were deemed a super, you couldn't play anything but supers, champs, only champs, and so on. In this new system, you play whatever you want. You're not limited to just having to be only playing in the events that you're qualified supposedly to play in. In this new system, everything throughout the country counts and matters. You can take points with you. If you move, get relocated for work, travel, anything happens, wherever you go, your points go with you. But I don't know if you know it, but right now, if one of you was to relocate and you were number 2 in our Super Champ category, whatever section you move to, you have to start from scratch. They're not going to place you based on what you had because you lose your rankings and your points. Finally, we can all speak the same language. So one common system throughout the entire country and no more structural advantages. So sections in the past could manipulate the system they put in place and how they set it up to best fit their section to perhaps manipulate results or accomplishments. That no longer happens in the new system because we're all under one common identical system. So that's all I had for you about the 2021 system and what's coming up. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the return to play after this stoppage that we've encountered due to COVID-19. As you know and you're well aware, extremely unprecedented what we're dealing with in the country at this point. Our concern, it's got 3 elements to it. We need to find ways in which our events can ensure the safety of the players, the safety of the parents, and the safety of every provider that's out there working in the events. I can tell you that it's something that has been taken very extremely serious by the organization from the moment that this started to gain some ground. Maybe about 2 or 3 weeks before we actually suspended play, National created a panel or a committee of experts in the medical field. So these are not necessarily tennis experts. These are experts on our health and how we deal with COVID-19. Those experts have met every Friday since that second or first week, actually since I think the last week in February when they started meeting to best analyze and determine what is in the best interest of, again, players, parents, and providers. Based on that is that they've come up with the suggestions they've come up with, and based on that is that we're right now dealing with it the way that we're dealing with it. So some of you may say, well, I'm eager to go back to play. I don't think, is my opinion, that this is not that big of a deal. Well, I may upset you. I can tell you that I don't want to upset you. I don't like to upset people. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, oh yeah, we're going back to play tomorrow. We're probably not. This is going to take some time and we need to be cautious. We'd rather be cautious than to be overly aggressive, encounter a setback, and then have to deal again with something that we're dealing now with this suspension, or maybe even something worse. Because as we all know, this is a virus that is showing no true discrimination. We've had, I mean, they've tried to put it into an area where they tell us that certain age brackets are not really susceptible to it. Well, that's not true. We've seen people from all ages give into the virus. And we've seen also people from all ages. I mean, I don't know how many of you read about the Italian lady that I think she was 99 and she survived it. So it is so unprecedented that, yes, we're being extremely cautious with it. Now, return of play. I think the first question you would all ask me is when. As of right now, as you all know, we're in a suspension at least until May 31st. That National Committee of Medical Experts I told you about met last Friday. We are all awaiting news from them sometime this coming week in which we find out if in fact the 31st of May will be the end of the suspension of play and we can start planning to resume play in June, or if it is that they're going to extend the suspension of play for a longer period of time. We don't know that yet. I'm being completely transparent with you. It's just the way that the organization is operating. I can tell you again that we are going to be very careful and try to be as safe as possible of when we free up. So let's say, for example, that it came out and they said June 1st, you can go back and resume play. Well, I don't want to mislead you either and let you to think that if they say that on June 6th, you'll be playing a tournament somewhere. You'll be playing a champ or a challenger or a super champ the way that we've always known them. I'm afraid to tell you that I've since, I think the last week in February, I've been having about 3 calls a week with the same other 16 individuals in the other 16 sections that do what I do for Texas. And in those meetings, it's pretty ironic how this worked out. At the beginning, when we first started meeting back at the end of February and throughout probably most of the month of March, when we still didn't comprehend yet or truly understood what this virus was about, we would talk about, we were planning of when we went back to what we called normal. Our ignorance led us to believe that we were going to go back right where we had left off. As time has transpired and we've gone through, we've come to understand the severity of the virus and the severity of what it's doing to the country. So we no longer refer as going back to normal. We refer to it as going back to what the new normal is going to be. Because as we are aware, the next question that comes to mind is, well, how do we go back to play? Well, you all know that from a governmental standpoint, there's different set of rules that are ranging from city to city of what's allowed and not allowed to do. Because every city has been empowered to dictate on their own community how they're going to deal and handle with the virus. So with that being said, could we come up as a USTA with a set of rules and say, this is how our tournaments are going to be played? We can't, because each one of our set of rules will have to be in compliance with whatever it is allowed to do by the government structure, whatever the tournament is taking place, or even by the facility where the tournament is being played at. Because the public courts and public parks, and most of the high schools and middle school courts are being regulated by the government and how we can go utilize their facilities. But the private clubs are entitled and empowered to regulate themselves. I'll give you an example. Last Thursday, I spoke to 2 clubs in the northern Dallas area. These 2 clubs are within a 20-minute drive from each other. They both host tournaments. In one of them, if you want to play, you can use the facility, you can play matches, but you cannot play doubles, it can only be singles. And when you schedule your courts, you're not allowed to schedule 2 matches next to each other or 4 people playing on 2 different courts next to each other. The way that private club has set up their own operational structure dealing with COVID-19 is that a court has to be empty in between every court that is being utilized. In the other club, 20 minutes down the street, they have a similar regulation that it can only be singles, no doubles, but in that facility, you're allowed to book matches on courts next to each other. So just want to share with you this perspective of how drastic it's going to have to be in order for us to go back and figure out what this new normal is. And it's something that as much as you want to get ahead of it and try to pre-plan, this is how you're going to do it. You're subjected to having to wait until we find out when is it that we can resume play, how are the suggestions coming from national and the medical advisory group that we resume play when we resume play, and then work with all the local facilities and tournament directors that might be running events to then figure out how can they structure their events to take place after COVID-19. So I know that you probably wish I had more specific items to give you on the when and the how. We know you're anxious. We're as anxious as you are. We'd love to get back to what we used to know normal. But like I said earlier, I don't think for a while, for a long time, tennis is not going to return to what we deem normal. It's going to be a new normal. And our regular daily lives will not return right away back again to what we deemed normal before. We're going to have to all operate on this new normal because unless there's a vaccine or a cure for this, we have to continue to respect it and be very careful with it. That concludes the presentation. I have to change my screen, go back to where you guys are, and see if there's any questions that perhaps I can answer. We have about 5 minutes left.
The first question is, what if I play L1 to L4 tournaments that are greater than 4 days each? How do I do this if in public school?
That is a great question. Most of your level 1 tournaments are scheduled during holidays throughout the year. Those are the big national events. Most of your level 2s, they're really, usually I think they're more like a 3-day event. I don't think they're really going to the 4, but they left it open in case that the event is run during the summertime. The level 3s, as you know, the one that we run in January, we run it as a 4-day event, but only with the finals on Monday. So in our events, I believe that's changing to only be a 3-day event with finals only of main draw playing on Monday. So all the other players that play the event will be home unless they're in the main draw finals. They'll be home by Sunday night. Level 4 events are going to follow that same structure. So level 4 events, unless you're in the finals of the main draw, you will not be required to miss school in order to play on the events. And the level 5s and below, they're all 2-day events. Next question.
Is there a limit to the number of Super Champ tournaments a player can play in 2021?
In 2021, again, there's no Super Champ tournaments, and there's no limit on the amount of tournaments you'd like to sign up and try to play in. Next question.
It's a 10 and under related question. If what happens to the present one-day challenger?
You want to answer that one, Amanda?
Sure. Could you go back to your slide of the pathway if you don't mind?
And if I don't mind, if I mind, I don't have to?
Yes.
Just kidding, Amanda. I don't know how many of you deal with Amanda, but Amanda's a rock star. If you don't know Amanda, go out of your way to meet her. She's awesome.
So this slide that Julio referenced earlier, the L7 on that top line that has the green ball with it, all of that line is referencing ages 12 through 18. There's no 10 and under divisions within that ranked space. That green ball in L7 will be a 12 and under green ball, if that is something that our section chooses to do, which has not been determined yet. So more to come on that. Any 10 and under play, which is our 1-day 10 and under green ball and orange ball challengers, those will now fall in that level-based play events directly below the rank space. So we will still have orange and green ball events, They will just fall in that level-based play, round robin type formats. And again, that's a section decision that we still need to come up with as things continue to come to us. So we'll come on that, but we have in and under events taking place in 2021. Next question is, right now I have to travel to work on my national ranking each month. With the new system, can I theoretically never leave Texas?
Yes, theoretically, you can never leave Texas because any ranking that you attain will be considered a national ranking.
That is all the questions we have currently.
Fantastic. Look at that, 5:59. I told you that I was going to be right on time. I appreciate all you're doing. I beg you to please continue to be extremely cautious with this COVID-19. Stay healthy. If there's anything that we can do for you, reach out to us at the office. We're trying to keep you as informed and as educated as we can possibly do. And have a great rest of your weekend.